order here, if we may. Mr. Mueller, can you give us a roll call?
Certainly. Member Church?
Here.
Member Liebelt?
Here.
Member Minor?
Here.
Member Nickel?
Here.
Member McGuire is absent. Chair Bergman?
And I am here.
All right, we have a quorum.
Great. Okay. So we're going to start, as we usually do, with a review of the minutes from our last meeting. So has everybody had an opportunity to take a look at the minutes? Are there any changes proposed? Can I get a motion to accept the minutes?
I move that we accept the minutes.
And a second?
I will second.
Aye. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we have minutes. Okay, getting to our next item. We usually ask if there's any visitors here who would like to address us with non-agenda items. We allocate 15 minutes at this time for people who would like to speak to us for something that is not listed on the agenda. So,
We currently have nobody viewing the meeting online, and everybody in attendance is here for an agenda item. Unless they have something else they just really want to talk about.
okay, so I suppose from there, that resolves item 3, and we will get to item 4, the advisory review for 525 East Center Avenue. And this is a proposal for a shed at the rear of one of our Lake Bluff landmarks. And so, would you give us a little background on this, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So they are proposing, Tim Nofke and Kathy Stribelis are proposing to construct a shed in the rear of their landmarked property. It is historically known as the McGaw House, located at 525 East Center. It was landmarked in 2006 and constructed in 1915. Aside from the advisory review here today, they will also be going before the PCZBA next week for 2 different variations as a separate matter. With that said, tonight your goal is to review whether or not and evaluate the consistency of any proposed work and see if it is inconsistent with the historic nature of the property. You will have 3 options. The first is to terminate the review, and the advisory review will end tonight. The second, you can continue the review till the next meeting. And if there's insufficient evidence, or you can continue with the review because you deem the shed to be inconsistent.
Okay.
We also have the applicants here, and they have a presentation as well. So I think, Mr. Wheeler, are you presenting?
Yes.
You can approach if you would like.
Wells, come up and speak to us.
Are we ready?
Yes.
Let me just share my screen.
There, okay. My name is Wells Wheeler. I'm an architect from Lake Forest. And once upon a time, I was on the HPC in that burg, so I'm familiar with your spot. I haven't been on this side of it for a long time. Anyway, as Eric mentioned, it was the house at 525 East Center is depicted. I highlighted around the perimeter. It was built in, my notes said 1914 by Vernon Beale. And it's a two-story stucco cross-gabled roof in the tradition of the Prairie style and Craftsman style with Tudor elements, as described by Susan Benjamin. And she does historic assessments, and she's very credible. The first slide you saw, that's the old portion of the house. The house was expanded in '04 prior to submitting for historic landmark status. So And you can see the cross gable, that's, the gable facing north and the one facing east shown here, and there's another one on the west side. And you can see the Tudor elements aren't really visible because they're painted white, but there's kind of a half timbering and some delicate windows, and then we have this element up in the gable end, which later you'll see. I've tried to borrow some of the elements for the shed, and it's a small shed. Okay, next slide, please. That's the front entrance. You can see that's another gabled piece with stucco walls and some heavy timber. And next slide, please. This is that's from a report I got from the village. This was the Susan Benjamin's, or at least the cover of her information, her assessment. But this gives a small description of the house and things that I just mentioned about its craftsman style and prairie style. So as I mentioned, this is the back side. It was a great fall shot with the fall colors. I had to include it. We're not doing anything with the deck, but this is the back side. This was the addition in '04. So next slide, please. These are all new elements that were added in '04, and this is away from the street, and it kind of faces the inner portion of the block. So it's not really visible anywhere. Next slide, please. Not visible necessarily from the street. This is the backyard, and the raised portion outlined with limestone. There are a couple little pavers in there and some white cedars, but that is the area where we would like to build the shed. And the next slide, please. This is the survey. I guess we should zoom in. Well, we'll zoom in on the next slide, showing the house kind of, at the rear of the property. Most of the property is out in front of the house on Center Avenue, between Gurney and Maple, I believe. Anyway, facing
Simpson,
north.
Simpson and Moffett.
Or
Simpson,
Moffett and Maple. Yeah.
Moffett and Maple, thank you. This
is a little more detail on the right side. You can see in the southeast corner, that's where we'd like to put the shed. There's a small floor plan of the shed and a little more detail on the backyard. And we're maintaining 5 feet off of the property line, but that's I think that's, you don't have to, that's not of any interest to you guys, is that correct? That would be of interest to the next week's.
The
Right.
zoning
Yeah.
matters will be
Yeah.
with the PCZDA.
Yeah. Okay, next slide is, I wish the sketches had come through a little better. Anyway, that's a building elevation. It's about an 11-foot wide and 10-foot tall to the eaves. And this showing a foundation plan and a building section and a couple views of the only interesting part of the shed, which shows, I wanted to put some clear story lights in there so we could have some natural lighting in the shed. The exterior is going to be stucco panels at this point, or possibly painted plywood with a Thoroseal stucco-like finish. But we just want to borrow the same color as the house, and one or two little elements. The roof pitch will be the same as the house. So we just want to make it look like it's either been there for a while, but we're not trying to create the Taj Mahal. Let's see. So we're seeking approval for the addition of a garden shed, which will be almost completely hidden from view from Center Avenue. The addition will have zero impact on the streetscape and will not impact the historic features of the house. In addition, the shed will be compatible with the size, color, materials, and character of the existing residence. The shed will be a separate element, which, if removed, would not impact the existing historic features of the house. The shed will borrow some elements from the main house in a scaled-down fashion. The roof pitch will match, and we will borrow the gable ends and some horizontal trim. That would be like the half timbering that you can't really see from the photos. You have to get up there really close to see it. And the exterior cladding will be stucco panels and or stucco paint. We'll try to match the color and to match the trim color, and that's our show. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Walls. Okay. Do you folks have any comments to make? You're the homeowners, right? Okay, so I would just, okay, I just want to offer you that opportunity, so.
I think our thinking is, have it be a pretty extra building, not a garden shed that you would typically think of, but more of a auxiliary building that,
Okay.
is part of our backyard landscape and attractive.
That fits well with the house and the neighborhood.
Yeah, it seems to. Comments, thoughts? Questions?
Since this is really a change to the yard more than a change to the house, I'm not even sure why this needs to come before us. I mean, just to my way of thinking, maybe you can answer that.
Well, it's a landmark property, so any of the changes to the
Yeah.
exterior to the property.
Oh, to the
become-
exterior as well.
So
I mean, this
if-
is considered.
So we could look at this if Wells was planning his fantasy Mies van der Rohe glass box. Okay, we could object to that and say, we don't think that design follows the course and scale of the property. So it is important that it come before us, even though it would be the same if it was a garage or any other detached building. So it does fall within our purview. It's kind of fun seeing a little garden shed like this. I think it's a cute little building. Any other thoughts?
I love how the design of it really reflects the architecture of the home. And that you incorporated a lot of the elements of that, the little louvered portion at the top that looks like the windows in the home, and,
It's a vent.
yeah, the vent.
You need
Yeah.
ventilation in
But
a space
from
like
a
that.
distance, it kind of looks like the windows that are
Yeah.
top of in the home, and the timbering and the stucco, and yeah, I think it's a good
Comment?
blend.
Yep, I would agree with her that
Okay.
it looks good.
Wells, on the drawing that we have in our package, it shows the west elevation, and then it shows a second west elevation, which then, in your presentation here, was marked as a section drawing. So
I know, I changed that on my drawing.
that's fine, that's fine. I'm wondering, what's the east elevation look like? Does it have the same clear story windows or a ventilator or anything on that? I
Yes.
realize it backs up onto a garage for your
Yeah.
neighbors, but does that follow through on the neighbor side of the property?
Yeah, I knew I was going to get that question. Yes, it doesn't have the doors. It'll have the clear story lights, and it'll have the vent, the
Okay.
louvered vent, and otherwise it'll be plain.
Okay, and then
And,
does the banding above the door, or does the banding at the gable, does that go all the way around the
Yeah.
building?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think those are all handsome,
Yeah,
very Tudor-esque additions to the building. And,
But they're very subtle on the house. I mean,
Well, if
you
they're
have
not-
to
if-
look pretty hard to see it, so,
if they're not painted brown, they tend to disappear.
right.
That's right.
If they got painted out, so.
Yeah. So it'll be fun to,
is there fencing around the east and the
Yes.
south sides then?
yeah, there's a wood cedar fence. Yeah, yeah,
Around the whole backyard.
yeah.
Okay. So,
And we're, in PCCBA will look at all of the zoning and all of that,
Yeah.
right? So we're just looking at it from a,
right, we're looking at
does
this,
it-
we're looking at this
how
from
do
the aesthetic standpoint
yep, and from the streetscape.
and the streetscape, right. It's,
Right.
we're less interested in a proper, in a garden shed in the backyard. If it was in the front yard, we would be a lot more interested,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
Different ballgame.
Right.
so, but that's part of, part of the charge of what we do.
Yeah.
So,
Someone would have to look very, very carefully to see this from the street. So I don't see how it affects the streetscape at all.
You probably can't see it at all.
You can,
Probably see it's behind the
if we go
garage.
back to the photos, there's one shot taken at from the north of the garage, and this is behind the garage. So you might be able to get a peek of some part of it, but we're 5 feet off of the east, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
you're not gonna see.
I walked by it today and
Oh,
I was
good,
trying to,
You might be able to
yeah, see,
couldn't see anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's pretty well hidden, so.
The other thing I might point out is that there's a natural spot for it really in the backyard. There's that elevated, as Wells pointed out, the elevated and limestone pad that really we don't use it for anything because all the backyard use is on the other end of the yard where the deck is. So it's really right now kind of wasted space, if you will. And there's a natural place to put something very functional there.
Are you planning on putting the shed right on top of that pad? Is that, or were you going to take the pad out and put in a foundation?
We could raise it up, but I think that would make it a little harder access.
Level with the ground.
So you can wheel stuff in and out.
how do
You
you,
have to ramp up to it, and
so,
That's-
I'm
that's a
assuming you're gonna
complication.
be storing kids' bicycles and lawnmowers and things like that in there.
Paddle boards and.
yeah.
Which,
Winter
which,
furniture, summer furniture.
which
and
side of-
all the seasonal things that are now in the garage, so we can only get one car in the garage, and it's only a 2-car garage, so. We both have electric vehicles, so we want to meet both cars in the garage, so we can plug in.
Yeah.
It'd be a nice space to store all the stuff that's now occupying the second.
how do you, if I was gonna park my bicycle in there, which side of the house are you gonna approach that from? You gonna go down the east side?
East side or the facing the house to the left side, there's a
Okay.
gate. I don't know, if you go back to slide 3,
There was a walkway, correct? There's even a walkway.
Yeah.
there's even, so if you look left of the car there,
Gotcha,
on the
okay.
fence, that's an actual gate that goes to the backyard, and it's gravel, if you open that gate, it's a gravel path where the shed will be in the back, which will be where you see that, one of those white cedars just peeking out from the left side of the garage.
Got it, okay, great. Any thoughts? What would we
Just
like?
have one question here. Your drawings show a foundation on this, a frost wall.
Yes.
You're not going to be doing that? Because you're going to do a slab on grade or something.
A slab on grade with a turned-down edge. That's.
Right, thickened
We
slab.
have to do that because it's,
But not, so your drawings aren't accurate.
well, the foundation plan is, it's a trenched foundation.
So it is
So-
a foundation. So you go down 32
Does-
inches, 36 inches,
Down to frost,
frost
yes.
line.
Yes.
All right, so it has a foundation.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can just barely read that. It looks like it's 3 feet, 3
6.
feet 6, right?
42
grade.
inches is frost in this area.
Yeah, so you're digging pretty deep, so.
I know.
It'll be stable.
It'll be, it won't heave, and, you know, that's the whole point of the foundation, is to keep it steady and level.
Does anybody object to this? Everybody seems pretty happy with this? All right. Earlier, Eric read our options to us. And if you flip back to the second page, they're done in the pale green, pale yellow, and red. What kind of option would we like to choose here? Would we like to terminate the review?
I would move that we terminate the review.
Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, let's,
Should I take a roll call?
let's
vote?
do a roll call. I'm not certain on that, but let's just do a
All
roll
right,
call
good.
for
Let's
that.
do it. Let's make it official.
Member Church,
Aye.
Member Liebelt,
Aye.
Member Minor,
Aye.
Member Nickel,
Aye.
Chair Bergman.
Aye.
All right. The advisory review is terminated.
Okay.
That sounds so final.
Positive in this case for
Sometimes our language gets a bit turned around.
Means you're on to the next step. You've now passed go.
Can I just say, it's such a beautiful home, it's a treasure. Do you just absolutely love it? It's one of the most beautiful homes that,
Now, before you go,
good.
I want you to know that we have the HPC has a proposal in front of the PCZBA specifically addressing changing how the PCZBA views zoning variations. And we are asking them if they will change the burden of proof, so that if you have a landmarked house, the burden of proof is altered. It's not wiped out or anything, but we are asking them, would they consider changing the burden of proof for a landmark house to say that the landmark houses in town need a little bit of assistance, they need a little bit of help, so therefore, we're not going to enforce the burden requirement in the kind of draconian way that a ZBA can, okay? And we're going to talk about that a little later this evening,
Okay.
but
I can address that at the moment.
Okay.
So in the original proposal, there was a rebuttable presumption that pretty much stated if a landmark home comes forward for a zoning variation, it's assumed they meet the standards. The village board was not comfortable with that rebuttable presumption, so the language of that text, which was shown at the PCZBA's last meeting, will go before them next week and has been showed to the village board and they were comfortable with, was essentially the language says if a landmark home comes before the village board, the PCZBA shall consider the historic nature of the home. And that is essentially how that language would look.
Okay. And that'll loosen up the requirements, because we're,
That has not been passed,
Yeah.
so that hasn't even been recommended to the board from the PCZBA yet.
Yeah.
That's being discussed next Wednesday, so that won't come into effect for your application next Wednesday.
so I wanted to mention that to you so that if you wanted to put the brakes on this and wait for the PCZBA to get done with their legislative review and then get the village board and their review, I have no way of understanding how much time that is. But you've already come before us with a zoning question, so I want you to be aware of the fact that we've gone and asked them, would they modify this? So I don't want to have that, gosh, I could have had a V8 moment occur. Okay, so just so that you're aware that this change is sort of in the air.
I think we understand that, something is going to change, and we're hoping that'll be favorable to our
Yeah.
petition. But,
So, and
but, if we present it and they have something substantive to discuss, I think that's good for us.
okay,
So-
good, just so you're aware.
Just for clarification, I don't think there are any zoning variations you're looking for with this, are there? Or are there?
Yes, there are. There are two different variations that they have
in the
applied
package.
for with the PCZBA.
Yeah,
Okay,
so,
sorry.
okay, so I just,
Just stepping over hurdles.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
It's
Thank you
worth
for
it.
coming. We appreciate your,
Enjoy your home.
We will.
yeah. And by the way, we enjoy biking and walking past your house also.
Is that your purse?
Your purse.
That would not be good.
You'd know where it was.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you again.
all right. Wells, good night. Okay. All right, we're going to talk about the zoning changes in a couple of minutes when we get to our report section. But the next item on our agenda is the Frank Lloyd Wright house at 231 East Prospect Avenue. And so this came up on the agenda as part of sort of our ongoing list of things that are sort of on our agenda. I don't know that anything has changed since the last time we discussed this.
Yeah, this is, I will say, pretty much similar to the memo that Glenn presented several months back. I can't remember which meeting that was, but the Frank Lloyd Wright Conservancy sent a letter to the History Museum saying this home is truly worthy of landmark status. It is identified with a renowned architect who made significant contributions to the architecture world. Few of these homes remain. This home is looked upon as a treasure by the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation, and Lake Bluff would do well to identify and preserve it. Oh, that was the landmark nomination. I apologize. But for 231 East Prospect, they said, recent investigation confirms the house is not a Frank Lloyd Wright designed American Systems built homes model C3. The structure as originally built deviated substantially from any known Wright plan. The significance of the Vander McLuhan house is as evidence of the influence of Wright's architecture on other builders in Lake Bluff and what it tells us about Wright's work through its differences from the Model C3 as much as its similarities. So the purpose at this meeting is merely to discuss it. You won't make any final decisions on this matter. The commission may determine that there is still basis for the property to have landmark protection owing to its connection to its prior owners or other architectural characteristics. And pretty much, you should provide direction to staff as to what action, if any, is desired at a future meeting.
Good.
Did we confirm that that was initiated by who initiated this information? Because it wasn't by the owners of the property, is that true?
It's my understanding that this is part of the the Frank Lloyd Wright Association's just ongoing research into all things Frank Lloyd Wright.
Okay.
And so they
It
are,
was unsolicited.
it's unsolicited, yes.
It's worth noting that there are many such organizations. They are not the end-all and be-all of
Oh, okay.
all things Frank Lloyd Wright, I think. I mean, would you agree with me that there
Well, I know there's several different organizations, and to be perfectly honest, I don't track them that closely to know if one is preeminent, or the, the quote, authority on all of that. I find the letter very interesting, and I'm pleased to see all of the floor plans and diagrams that they've put together. I think that's a very interesting proposition. But even in their own letter, they say that not all of the Frank Lloyd Wright information exists. The records from the Arthur Richards, forgotten the name of his company, the name of the company is in here. Those records were not kept. So there's a certain disparity as to just what the original records look like. So,
I'm not sure that there were a whole lot of records kept. In looking at, reading about the Richards Company, they were, Frank Lloyd Wright designed the homes, correct me, designed the homes, and then Richards was really in a contractual agreement to then just sell those house plans to people, right? And then
we'd sell not only the house plans, but he'd sell you
the kits,
a
the whole
kit
kit,
full of sticks.
yeah,
And
sticks and stucco,
yeah, sticks and stuccos, and your carpenter would show up and assemble it all for you.
yeah.
So,
Was it, Paul, I don't know, was it common for builders to make adjustments to those kits? Did that happen?
Yeah, I would think
I
that
think they
that.
weren't supposed to, but did they?
So what Wright is trying to do here is Wright is trying to do a more architecturally aesthetic thing, as is the same thing that Sears and Roebuck and J.C. Penney, I think, did some. And then there was a couple of independent companies that did kit homes.
Right.
So you're trying to reduce the cost of construction, you're trying to simplify the construction, and trying to unitize it. And so if you go into a Sears house and look at the ends of the boards, there's a number stamped on every single two-by-four and every floor joist and stuff. And Wright came up with his own system for doing it. And it's all about cost savings and time savings. And when this was going on in the 30s and the 40s, and nobody ever really figured out how to make it work in relationship to the good old-fashioned hire an architect,
Yeah,
buy a piece of land, and, have the carpenters come in and actually build you a house. And my grandfather was a carpenter in this era, and my dad worked as a carpenter when he was a kid. So I have a certain amount of Wisconsin history about all of this. I would think that the homeowner would walk on the job, and the carpenter would say, well, why don't you do this? Or the carpenter would say, I did this for you. I would think that a lot of the Wright houses would be changed. If you look at the dimensions of the Wright house, this is a dinky little house. The Wright
Yeah,
houses were
yeah.
dinky little houses.
yeah.
So, one of the comments that the Wright experts make in this is that they're not sure if it started out as a pirated Wright house. So maybe that somebody started out with a set of Wright drawings, but they didn't buy the stick kit. So I think there's a couple of different variations of what might have been occurring here.
Yeah, and didn't they say at one point in the packet that they ran, it's possible that it was a Frank Lloyd Wright kit, and the outside was clad with stucco, but there wasn't, the whole inside was not clad with stucco, indicating that possibly because they expanded the kit, they ran out of
Yeah.
stucco. It just seems like there are some indicators that it really was.
Yeah, you only get so many pounds of stucco in the kit that you buy,
Yeah,
and if you use it all, if you expand the size of the house.
bedrooms
yeah,
don't get stucco.
Yeah, your bedrooms suffer from that.
Yeah.
Can I share with
Yeah,
you?
and so,
Okay,
Jamie has brought her
I have
research kit with her.
this book, it's called The Frank Lloyd Wright Field Guide by Thomas Hines, and it's by Northwestern University Press. And I don't think it's that old. It was published in 2005. So this house that we're considering, which I have this picture of right here, hold that up, is in this book. He doesn't say a whole lot about it other than it is very close in style to the O'Connor House of Wilmette, which is also in this book. And the O'Connor House in Wilmette is the Richards Brothers American System bungalow. There are several in Milwaukee that are also listed in here. And it says there have been a few changes to the interior, and the entry porch has been enclosed, and so on and so forth. And then I was just noodling around. Sometimes you can really go down a rabbit hole with these,
Yeah.
and it'll refer, to one house, and then it'll refer to another, and I just start looking around. And I found this one, there's a Hannian House Son in Evanston, in which the author says, this is another example of the American System's ready cut. This happens to be a two-story house. And he uses a statement, the system obviously allowed for considerable customizing in order to suit each site and the wishes of the clients. And to me, that indicates that people who've studied this didn't always stick to the
Recognize they
blueprints.
did that, yeah. Is that house in Wilmette considered then to be a Frank Lloyd Wright American Systems home?
Yes, it is. Let me find it again.
But it said Richards.
I think she's mentioning the owner's name.
Well,
Not the-
it sounds like maybe Richards, of Richards, I'm sorry. I meant to-
Oh, the one in Wilmette you're talking about, it's called the J.J. O'Connor House.
No,
And it's
but-
on Gregory Avenue. I don't know where that
I
is.
thought you said it referenced the Richards, like, prefabbed
I'm
home.
sorry?
I thought you referenced the prefabbed home.
Oh, okay.
It was somebody else.
This was a there are two houses I'm referencing. In the description of the one we're considering, it says that it looks, it's very close in style to the O'Connor house, which is the one in Wilmette. And, you know, I can pass this around and let you take a look at that, and I can see where they'd say that they're similar in style. It does say that this was built in the 1916. And, yeah, he does attribute this one to Wright, and then this other one, the Hanny House, which is also an American Systems house in Evanston. That's the one where this author says that the system allowed for changes.
But what did he call the system on that description?
American System built, American Systems Ready Cut,
Yeah, that's
what
this,
they're called.
Okay.
but, and he,
It's brothers.
the author is citing all of those as being right houses.
Yeah.
Okay, whereas these people are writing in and saying, this is not a right house. And so I think that's where the, sort of
It's not a
change in,
pure right
yeah, the
house.
change in syntax comes, so pass this down to Margaret. Or take a look at it and then pass it down. The other thing that I am very concerned about as we consider the landmark for this house is the social history. And those of you who know me, that I'm always interested in the social history of what we have in Lake Bluff. The house was designed for, the client was William Vanderkloot. And Vanderkloot was one of those sort of uber Lake Bluffers. He was, I think, village president. He was the police chief. He may have been involved with the school system also, but he's one of these guys who made Lake Bluff part of his lifestyle, sort of in every aspect. And either he or his son was also very involved with the fire department. And so there's a great deal of social history involved here also, and I would not want to, change the historic status of this house without much more carefully considering the Vanderkloot impact, the social history on the property. So I think that's an aspect of it also, sort of stands outside of this letter that we've received. So,
My feeling is that I don't know if it will ever be determined whether it was really a Wright house or not. I'm not sure that is to be found, that information. But it's certainly of the right time period, it's certainly of the right style, and that, given the social history of it, I'm not a fan of taking this off the register either.
decertifying?
I'm not a fan of decertifying it either.
so, Randy, you have any thoughts?
No.
Okay, good. All right. It doesn't sound like there's much interest in taking any affirmative action at this point.
If the property owners haven't initiated it and there's ambiguity in all of these, it seems like it represents the style. But in all of these cases that you just cited, it shows that there's been changes. One of them, it looks like Wright did sign the drawings, but I don't know. I think the status quo is reasonable, given that, as you said, there's multiple sources and there's nothing definitive.
Eric, do we have to do anything with this?
So tonight is just a discussion. If you look to the last paragraph of the memo, I'll just read it right here. It says, "The commission may determine that there is still a basis for the property to have landmark protection owing to its connection to its prior owners or other architectural characteristics. In this case, staff will pursue modifications to the designation to reflect this new information." So if you wish to remove the Frank Lloyd Wright reasons for landmarking it and were to determine the Vanderklut reasons as reasons to landmark it, you could modify the landmark and the reason for why it is historic. As another alternative, the HPC regulations allow for landmark status to be withdrawn where, quote, "the reasons for which the designation was once appropriate are no longer present, including without limitation because additional information has been discovered." So that is also an option going forward.
Okay. So,
So, Mr.
yes,
Hey, good evening.
Mr. Drew.
Hey, how is everybody?
Thank you for coming.
Happy to be here.
We enjoy having
I was
guests.
curious about this, and so one thing I think staff can research, maybe one other alternative, and Eric, I didn't hear you say this, and I don't remember if it's in the memo, but the idea of maybe just adding it to the record, right? Part of when you go through the process of preservation and landmarking a property, part of that process is to collect information about a property and complete the historic record. So maybe this just appends the record. And at a minimum, that can be a simple step that could be done and begs the question that, does leave it to history to find out if there is such a, so anyway, we can verify that by the next meeting,
Yeah.
so.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's a great comment.
Mr. Chairman, would the ordinance then be amended to
Well, I'm
change what
I'm not
the
entirely
reasons
sure,
for?
I'm not entirely sure if we can just simply slip the letter into the file folder for this, or we need to go through and formally accept it
Yeah,
into the application and make it part of the application.
As Drew just said, that is something we will research and find out for you.
okay.
Okay?
So do
All right.
we,
I
do we
would
have
be-
to table the discussion?
Well, the village is gonna do some research for us to find out,
Good.
to give us some further guidance of whether we can just simply drop it into the file, or
Right.
whether we have to officially add it to the file. At this point, I would be in favor of just simply placing it in the file and not taking any official action, but I can be dissuaded and convinced to do other things also.
That's what I would do too. Just slip it in there.
Just slip it in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, was the village going to research more
Yes.
about?
We're procedurally this evening, you just simply continue the item to next month.
Right.
Just follow up with that detailed
Yeah.
procedures about.
Right.
So do we have to, I think we have to officially
Just
table the
Motion to take
table.
the conversation to the next.
Yeah, we just go ahead and table it. And actually, it's not a petition, so I think we can just agree to table it. Right?
Do they need to make a motion or
The title of the item is just.
discussion? All right,
No, we'll just wait till next month.
it's tabled.
We'll roll the matter forward till next month.
But can I clarify one thing before we leave this issue? The house has already been landmarked, is that correct?
Yes.
So we're talking, the discussion was not to landmark again, but to whether or not to remove the landmark status because of new information.
Decertify it.
Decertify it.
Yeah.
And certainly one possibility we could do is to, because of the social history, I think that's enough. And the fact that it is an interesting design, we could certainly say it's a possible Frank Lloyd Wright design and
We'll end up with
leave it
some,
at that.
some
Yeah,
ambiguity like
yeah,
that,
yeah. There's not much more we can do, really, but certainly looks like one to
Well,
me.
So the thing we can hope for is that someone goes and opens a wall up to remodel a house and a set of drawings falls out that says ABS on it or something.
Or that
What
the
I said-
wood has a stamp on it.
The wood has a stamp on
I
it.
don't know if Wrights did that.
That actually happened.
Or a picture of him
There's
in
a,
front of the house.
there's a plat plan at the History Museum that literally came out of the walls of one of the hotels when it burned down. And it shows where the railroad line went down East Sheridan Place. And it goes down to the bridge at Moffett Road. And so occasionally little miracles like that happen.
Yeah.
So, but I think for the most part, we'll table this till the next meeting. So, okay. So that's our business. I wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the status of the requests we have made to the village. And I've asked Eric if he could give us a bit of a recap of the various motions that various requests we've been made to changing the ordinances in Lake Bluff. So,
Yes, so the village board, to my knowledge, adopted pretty much the matter of zoning incentives is where the village board was uncomfortable, as mentioned earlier, with the rebuttable presumption, which presumed that a landmarked home applying for a variation automatically met the standards for a variation. That language has been revised, and the village board is comfortable with, sounds like they will be comfortable with this going forward, that it'll pretty much, if a landmark home comes forward for a variation, the PCZBA shall consider the historic nature as another consideration. The other aspect that has been discussed is the floor area bonus. The original one that was proposed was a 20% floor area bonus. The PCZBA was not comfortable with a 20% floor area bonus. They felt like that was too much and could create unintended consequences. This has been discussed with the village board as well, potentially looking at a 10% floor area bonus, a one-time 10% floor area bonus. I believe the village board, and Drew can correct me on this if I'm wrong, did not want the 10% floor area bonus to go towards any homes that already violated floor area bonus. So if they are already over on floor area, they would not be allowed to get the 10%. If they are already, yes, if they are already legally non-conforming.
doesn't that hamstring what we're trying to do at this point? I'm saying, the house over on North Avenue, which was it's 500 North, I think. It's the house that came to us, we landmarked it, they went to ZBA because they wanted to bump out the
Overhang?
They wanted to bump out the roof on the second floor because they wanted to put a second bathroom on the second. I wanted to put a bathroom on the second floor. It would be the second bathroom in the house. They also wanted a little more space to have some closets up there. The problem with the house is that it's a little large for the lot, and it actually sits cattywampus on the lot, so it's actually, a piece of it is on the neighbor's lot. So all of the setbacks are all violated. And so that's one of the examples that we were using to say, this is a house, it's got, it's the old camp meeting office that had been over on Prospect Avenue, moved over to North Avenue. It's just full of Lake Bluff history. The design of it is very Lake Bluffian, and we wanted to provide some sort of relief, that there's a relief valve in our systems that will say, you know, if anybody needs an extra bathroom on the second floor, you're kind of the one who needs that. So,
I will say I was not at the last village board meeting, so I don't know if Drew had anything to say, but what I can add to that is, so in terms of setbacks, the floor area bonus wouldn't affect a setback in the first place. And obviously they can still go before the PCCBA looking for a variation. And in that case, with setbacks, the first part I was talking about, where the zoning board would consider the historical nature of the property when considering. So, I mean,
Could I just, when you say historical nature, are you saying if it's landmarked?
if it's landmarked,
Okay.
protected features,
Okay.
consider the protected features of the property.
so
No, I thought you did a great job. The only thing I would supplement with is, I'm not sure that the PCZBA is done with the 10%. They were really, probably the most hand-wringing was over lot size, because like some lot size, this is not gonna matter at all, right? Bigger lots, but the smaller, it's like, so I think they're still chewing on it still, but they just, they wanted to get some direction from the village board, some immediate feedback on, going back to the rebuttable presumption language and maybe, softening that, not standing on the scale, but maybe putting your thumb on it. And then the other, with the 10%, make sure that they were going in the right direction. And to Eric's point, again, one of the board members was like, well, I hear you. I'm just, again, unintended consequences. Let's be careful. I think we need to be clear, and the zoning board needs to, it would be, this person said it would be my desire that they would start if you had room at the max. So the idea that you couldn't go back and get, you were capped. This is the cap. So I think the PCCB may have a comment about that saying, if that's your case, maybe you get 250 square feet or something. I think they're still chewing on it some, but I think that was a concern that was expressed at the board level. So I think they'll take that under consideration when they finish going through their evaluation and examination.
Yeah, okay.
And it's my understanding
I
that
want this board to be cognizant of all of this discussion.
but it was my understanding that it was never a guarantee, that it was a maybe, because to that point, it could have
Unintended consequences, yeah.
a negative impact to the surrounding environment, and that's not great.
And to your point about what we keep calling heritage lots, the smaller lots, like you think about those original cottage lots, like on East Prospect between, was it Glen and Gurney, or Moffett Gurney, yes.
Actually, all the way down to Sunrise Park.
But the idea of those small lots, those where you would want people to modernize those cottages and be able to keep them around at the same time, where would they be more impactful to your neighbor in such a small property, right? So I think that's the conundrum that they're trying to work through.
So the story that we heard when we were going through this, when my predecessor was still in the chair, there's a house, I won't identify the house, but one of the houses, the owners came and said, we can only market our house as a tear down because the house itself is essentially the house will be over bulk if we enclose the porches. Then if we try and remodel the house where we can't go out the back because we butt up against the rear property line, it would be nice to have a mudroom and or expansion of the kitchen. And they were saying an extra 5 feet of expanding into the backyard. And then they said they had building violations because they have a stair that literally curves around the chimney, which is an old-fashioned style of putting a stair in. The stair is too narrow and it's too steep, so that they can't bump out on the second floor. And this is a house that's got a ton of history to it. And so part of what we're trying to do is find a way to save that house in some fashion, is to say, maybe it impacts the neighbors a little bit. If it doesn't impact them a lot, maybe we can make something like this happen so that the house can survive into the its next iteration. So that's what we've been trying to that's what we've been trying to put together with the various boards in town. And they have very legitimate concerns when they talk about the unintended consequences. They've got some serious points that they're trying to make.
And I think there's greater sympathy for what you're describing. It's like, hey, we want to expand this stairwell so it's not, difficult, or we want, make this kitchen a little more livable and usable, or a mudroom that fits current, contemporary lifestyles, versus, we really want this hot tub space. I think they're more sympathetic to this, and
right.
so that's we don't want to be, an easy, like, oh, here, I'm going to use it over here.
have a
That's not what we really
freebie,
want it for, right?
And we want to give them the power to do that, but not the guarantee.
So I think that working in tandem with the new zoning standard, and maybe a bonus. So it's like you keep throwing enough at it, maybe it'll help get to the outcome that's desired.
So that's part of what we're trying to make this a code that encourages landmarking rather than making this a punitive, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't change this, once it's landmarked. We get back to the old saw, once it's landmarked, you can't paint your front door. We're trying to move very much in a different direction than that. This is also part of a national movement that's going on in preservation. So part of what's coming out in my Masters of Preservation classes is that this is going on across the country. The other thing that Lake Bluff has done is looked at waiving the building fees.
I was gonna ask
Building
whether-
permit fees for landmark structures are waived 100%.
Okay.
And then they also went as far for new landmarks will grant a property tax rebate for the village's portion up to a certain threshold.
So if the Village of Lake Bluff's portion of your tax bill is a third of your tax bill, you can get a discount off of that. You don't
I think
get
is it $2,000? It's an absolute cap.
Yeah.
I think that's the number, but it's substantial, right?
Sure.
It's
If it's,
meaningful.
so if
Yeah.
it's $2,000 over something like 6 years. So that turns out to be $12,000, at a total amount. That might be, a couple of new windows in your house, or, the equivalent of,
Few heating bills.
yeah, so some
My
of the appliances.
understanding of that was over 10 years, but the last couple of years it bumped up by 25% a year so that you didn't have a sudden,
That's the property tax freeze from the state.
I see, okay.
So
Different
this is-
program,
So
yeah.
you can get the state property tax freeze, and then you can get this little Lake Bluff bonus in there.
Gotcha.
And then you can get a waiver
Yeah,
on
they
your
all
building
build,
fees.
right?
Yeah.
So
All the
we're
carrots.
starting to stack up a whole
Pretty soon you
series
have
of
a bunch.
bonuses. And if then we get a resolution from PCZBA, then we get a resolution on stacking on some physical bonuses as far as what you can do with the property.
We did talk to the earlier applicant about, do you want to hit the pause button? And we had that conversation with them, and we are aware of at least one other applicant that's sitting on hold, waiting for this to go through the process, so.
Yeah. We haven't seen this much activity in a while. I think it's encouraging. I think,
That validates that it's important to do these
yeah,
carrots.
I think it's exciting, so.
Yeah.
And then, sort of the last thing I have to offer up, there's some inquiries going on around town about other people interested in at least considering landmarking their properties. I don't have anything to announce, but there may be some other activity there, so we have to keep our fingers crossed.
Mr. Chairman, I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but when all of this is firmly decided, then we'll probably be talking about how we're going to let people know about these incentives.
We get back to, should we start a seminar? Should we do a newsletter? Should we come out with another trifold that we send out? The village has plenty of avenues for, it has its own website and it has its own weekly village letter that comes out. So yeah, there's a couple of different avenues, but there might be something that we do directly. We have the list of our top 25 list of houses that we're in love with. We might write to them directly. So there are options
And the
there.
currently landmarked homes.
So yeah, there's some options there that we might do that. Way back in the past, when we first started, we actually had some seminars here. We invited them to come. We had speakers. We had 25 or 30 homeowners show up for a seminar that we had on landmarking in Lake Bluff. So we might, if we feel like we might do that also. So, other comments? Great thoughts? Ideas? I don't have much else to add. Do you have anything to add?
We have no staff report for this evening.
I have no
I would,
staff
let me,
report.
one thing,
We have the
not to
Drew-
end on a
Drew-
sour
we have the
note.
Drew report.
no, you may have already mentioned this or heard about this, but the demolition permit for Stone, is that, you guys already covered all that?
No, we haven't. Would you please give us an update?
So, yeah, the demo permit has been issued, and likely they will begin in earnest tomorrow. So they were continuing, plucking out various artifacts, the village did go through and capture a number of artifacts, but there were others that we'd asked for that they refused, and we don't know if they were salvaging it to sell or salvaging it for scrap, but like they've been trying to get the copper dormers and the rooftops off, and there were some large timbers they were pulling out before they started.
They were working on it today.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they've been working for some time. They concluded their asbestos remediation last month. So they had to get to that point before they can do some other things. But so it's coming.
Asbestos, how about lead?
So like lead paint, or so that is managed through the demolition process, through dust control. They're hanging a curtain on the north side of the property because where the gatehouse or coach house is so close to the other residences on the other side of the fence that they're erecting, whether the poles are up, and when they start, then they're going to start with the gatehouse. They're going to kind of move north, but they're hanging the curtain as part of that demolition. They're going to have water to control the dust. They're doing all the best practices, and that the curtain is something we asked them to do, and they were very agreeable to do that. So trying to keep the fugitive dust on the site. And then they're also, so they'll be using water, and then around the entire site, there's silt fencing and these logs that are like wood chips with a material that kind of serves as like a big sponge that holds it all in the site. And then when they're done, they'll scrape the earth off and redress it and take all that, and they have a different disposable system for all the, I'll call it hot waste, so.
Can I ask a couple questions? Will they be demolishing those homes or duplexes?
Not yet. They do
structures?
not have a permit for that.
Okay. And then, could you share a few things that the village was able to remove from the home? Or
I would love to share 3 things that are in my office, and he knows what I'm talking about. So there are,
in your office?
in my office.
You run out of space?
No, it's, for some reason, the contractor decided, well, this is kind of a cute story, but, so, there, on the elevations, on almost all the elevations, they were very ornate features of, maybe like pan with a flute, or some of them were like deer skulls with real antlers screwed into it, and 3 of those with the antlers are in my office. And they're large keystones, and they weigh like 75 to 100 pounds.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, and it,
Okay, 1, 2, 3, we'll put them in,
yeah.
put 'em up in here.
so and there's lots of those little reliefs or things from inside the house and from the perimeter.
They're porcelain medallions.
Some are,
Okay.
some, and then there are carved stone medallions from the surrounds at the various fireplaces. We have,
Those are marble, aren't
trying to think of the other pieces. But a lot of the objects we tried to get, and we worked with the History Museum and working the list, and the board looked at it, and we were, of course, it was a negotiation with the owner, what they'd be, willing to. There is some paintings, they were able to cut off some plaster, some hand painting on the walls, and forgive me because I'm maybe butchering some of the architectural terms for these, but we asked for some marble doors, and they didn't let us have that. There's a really interesting stone, or maybe it's one of the reliefs on the front of a Native American on a horse that was on a large marble column in the front with a copper roof over it.
Was it a bas relief? Was it like a big medallion?
It was, but it was inset into the stucco.
Right.
They let us have that.
Cool.
But I would call them pieces that were easier to move and easier to store, and that was kind of the general theme. We did get all the stained glass,
Wow.
Really?
and
How about any of the of that linen fold paneling.
Yeah. the
We
linen
asked for
press.
that, we did not get that.
Okay.
That was definitely on the list.
I would assume that's easily saleable.
I
in
would
the-
think so, yeah.
And it was already, it was taken off and leaning against the wall, and we were like, that, and that.
Two
and,
pieces?
Yeah, I mean, and that's, so yeah, so easily to repurpose, right?
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
maybe
that's
now
kind
we'll
of-
find out what is in the tower, if anything. Because I remember touring that building and the big question mark is what's up in the tower of the gatehouse? You could only go so high up. Do you remember that?
It's a
Yeah,
water
right.
tank. It's a water tank.
Well, they said at the time they weren't sure what was up there.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. But
I wanted to turn that into a little pied a terre. I would, I would, if we turned that into a condo, I would have bought the tower instantly, so, yeah.
Yeah, so, but yeah, we will, the contractor was charged with developing the list and there was, the contractor wanted to do some horse trading, wanted to keep one of the skulls and but we said, no, we want the materials. And so there was some, long story short is we need to go back and redo our inventory to make sure we have a better, we know we got everything we wanted to get, but in making sure it's properly documented is in the works, like within the next couple weeks here. But it's safely stored somewhere, so.
Great, okay.
Good job.
And then again, so the high end goal for all that is not unlike the middle school did when they repurposed their entry, the old East School, which is now the cabinet or trophy case, if you will, at the middle school, right? So those types of ideas, when can the village repurpose some of these and public improvements in these buildings or other facilities? So that's the high level goal.
Good, all right. So major demolition starts
Tomorrow,
Okay, they're bringing the cranes in and,
I think they're in, aren't they?
excavators, very large excavators.
okay. All right,
No kind of work again from on the gatehouse first, south to north, kind of folding it in on itself. Should be all in 30 days for both the structures.
it'll be difficult to watch. Okay, good, all right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're at the end of our meeting. Can I get a motion to end the meeting? Motion to dismiss?
I move we adjourn.
Second?
I second.
Any objection? All right, I guess we're adjourned then. All right. Good. Well, thank you, everybody. I want to thank all of you for coming and participating this evening. And I think we had some good things to talk about this evening. So